If your BMW B plus BST battery safety terminal device is activated, don't worry, because in this video I'll show you how to do a temporary repair, what I call a get you home fix, but also a really good DIY permanent repair on a budget. Okay, let's get started. So if you've had an accident in your BMW and the airbag's deployed, of course this will bring up the airbag warning light, and more than likely it will have triggered the BST. But in a lot of cases a very minor bump can cause the problem. Because your car is covered in sensors, so you've got your front, what they call accelerating sensors, and then there's one in the doors, the B pillars, and ultimately the control module will decide what to do about it. So there's been situations where owners have literally just bumped a wheel up a curb, and that's been enough to trigger the BST. So let's have a quick look at the symptoms. So your radio in your car will still work and your fan will as well, and initially the car will continue to run if it's running. But once you shut it off, then you won't be able to restart it again. So let's have a look and see what a blown BST looks like. My car is a BMW Z4 and this is what the battery positive cable looks like. So it's running from the positive terminal on the battery here, and this is the BST. And then it runs down to the boot floor, and that will then run forward to the front of the car to power the starter motor, etc. So there's a couple of ways that you can see if the BST is triggered or not. The first one is, if it's blown, then the terminal inside actually gets pushed away by the Pyro charge. And so you'll actually see about 15mm or 3/8 of an inch of metal part of the terminal exposed. The other way that you can tell that it's triggered is that there'll be a lot of in and out movement. So you can actually just grab the cable and push it towards the battery terminal and pull it away. And if you feel movement there, that's an indication that it's triggered as well. Or if you have access to it, then DIS software will also show the fault, or a good quality BMW specific code reader. I'll show you how I did a temporary fix on my BST. But you do this at your own risk, because if you screw the BST in place, then it won't be able to trigger and cut off the battery in the case of an accident. The first thing you need to do is disconnect the negative terminal from the battery. Next, insert a flat bladed screwdriver between the positive cable and the top of the BST cover. And you should be able to just gently lever the top of the cover off, and then remove it the rest of the way by hand. Another way you can do this is to remove these little small squares which hold the two parts of the cover together, but it's really fiddly to do with a terminal screwdriver and time consuming. If you do manage to do it this way, these little squares can be reinserted later when you put it back together again. You might find that the end of the cable is a little bit blackened from when the Pyro charge flew. If it is, just spray a little bit of brake cleaner onto a cloth and you can just clean up the end of that terminal. The next thing you need to do is reinsert the cable end back into the terminal, and then use a pair of pliers to squeeze it tight and make sure it's a snug fit. To ensure that the cable doesn't work its way free again, you need to drill a small pilot hole and then screw in a self-tapping screw in order to retain it. And that's it, that should be enough to get you going again. For the permanent repair, again you have to remove the negative battery terminal. And now we need to undo the BST trigger wire connection. This runs from the BST to the electrics of your car. And now you need to disconnect this smaller positive cable here. And this is the one that's powering things like your radio and your heater that we mentioned earlier. I'm just using a 13mm socket to undo this nut. And now remove the BST cover the same as I showed earlier. And now we can lift the battery cable out and put it off to one side. We're going to use this part again. Finally, we can unscrew the positive battery terminal using a 10mm socket. And this is the part we're going to discard because it has the blown Pyro in it. Speaking of which, this is what the blown Pyro looks like. You can see that it's all charred and black inside. And this is a good one. You can see the green dot in the middle and it's amber coloured around the outsides. Now you need to buy a used BMW positive terminal, and you can find them on eBay and other places. They cost about £25 or $35 US. This is a lot cheaper than the replacement splicing kit that you can buy from BMW dealers, which can cost hundreds of pounds. And it should be possible to find one that's from your car. If not, just make sure that the battery terminal part that screws onto your battery looks as similar to your existing one as possible. Once you've got the spare positive battery cable and terminal you need, you can go ahead and fit it onto your battery and screw it down into place. And then you can go ahead and lever out the positive cable, which we won't be needing because we're going to use the one that's still attached to our car. Now we can go ahead and push in the original positive cable and use a pair of pliers just to squeeze it tight. And once you're done, give the cable a little pull just to make sure it's in there tight. And now you can go ahead and reconnect the SRS connection and then tuck the cable and the connector out of the way where they won't get snagged on anything. And then we have the smaller ancillary positive cable to reconnect and the retaining nut to screw back down into place. With that done, it's time to put the battery terminal cover back on. If you manage to save any of the little squares, then congratulations, and they just go into these little holes here and they're actually quite fiddly to refit. But come on, it's not the end of the world if you have to use a tie wrap to hold the cover on. You can make it look quite tidy. Now it's time to reconnect the negative cable. Before we do, it's worth mentioning that if your airbag light was showing on your dash before you disconnected the battery, then there's a risk that there might still be a trigger signal in the system and you run the risk of blowing your fancy new BST that you've just installed. That's why it's advisable to double check the system is clear using DIS software or a fault code reader. I've actually done videos for both of those and I'll put a link to them both at the end of this one. Hopefully this video helped you, and if it did, then please consider giving me a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to make sure you get to see my next video. And finally, if you want to see more videos just like this one, then why not check out the recommended videos on the right. Okay, thanks for watching, catch you next time.